What's up, my brilliant biz bosses and solopreneurs? Welcome back to another episode of the Do.Different.Better show, where we talk about wealth, wisdom, and money moves, making finance simple for everyday people. I'm your host, Elaine Rasmussen, CEO and founder of Social Impact Now, Connective Institute, and managing director of the Integrated Capital Fund. If you are out here activating how to build wealth and deliver value to your clients, then this episode is for you. In last week's episode, we talked about understanding 4 key financial documents for your business, whether you're an inspiring investor, an entrepreneur, or just really curious about the company you work for, so that you know when it's a good time to ask for that raise or that transfer. That episode helped you decode the numbers and learn what they mean and how to use them to your advantage. But today we're going to be talking about consultants and something that people are struggling with, particularly women and people of color, and that is pricing your worth. So once again, you've got to be really aware about this if you're really trying to build a financial wealth building strategy for yourself and your family. So understanding, if you're a solopreneur, what that's going to look like, this is a show for you. I'm going to be talking about pricing and how to set your prices, and what you can do if you're really struggling with all of that, of pricing your worth. We're going to be getting into why the rates are important and how it's more than just a number, and how to shift your mindset and how to build confidence to claim what you deserve. My main focus is going to be on service-based businesses. I'll tackle product-based businesses in a future episode. So how did I get here today? I was on a call literally yesterday with a network of solopreneur consultants who are my fellow alums from the Just Economy Institute. And one of my colleagues was going to be going to a client meeting later that day and wanted some help on how she should approach her pricing, since this was going to be a 300 personal professional development facilitation for a major university where she lives. It was such a great, vibrant conversation. I thought, these folks can't be the only ones struggling with this topic. And that's when I knew I had to share what came up with all of you. So here's a not so fun fact. Did you know that according to the study of Freelancers Union, they found that women freelancers often charge less and significantly less than men do for the same services? But let me tell you something, knowing your worth and pricing accordingly isn't just about being empowered. It's really essential to running a sustainable business. By the time you're done with this episode, you're going to have some tools that you can confidently say, here's my rate, without flinching and with a smile that says, yes, I'm worth it. So let's get into it. First, let's talk about pricing. Pricing is a crucial aspect of any business. It directly affects your bottom line and profitability, especially as a solopreneur, since this might be your main source or only source of income. But before we dive into the specifics, let's first discuss why pricing is important. Pricing determines the value placed on your product or service and ultimately impacts consumer behavior, or how your customer behaves towards you. If your prices are too high, customers may look elsewhere for more affordable options. On the other hand, if your prices are too low, you may not be making enough profit to sustain or grow your business. As a retired communications professional, I can't tell you how much psychology and some guesswork go into figuring out your pricing, even for some of the big guys. Finding the right balance in pricing requires really understanding both internal factors of your business, such as the need for additional support, travel, production or administrative costs, external factors such as market demand and competition. It's also important to consider the perceived value of your services in relationship to your competitors and the general marketplace. But why is pricing more than just numbers? It is a mindset. It is about boundaries, and it is about recognizing your value. So let me tell you a quick story. Years ago, I met a brilliant consultant named Jamila. She was running herself ragged, charging low rates, and accepting every single client that came her way. One day, she realized she was really barely breaking even. Why? Because she wasn't factoring in her expertise or the time she spent prepping outside of client meetings. Jamila recalculated her rates to reflect the real value of her work, and within a year, she doubled her income. The kicker, her clients respected her more because she respected herself. So here's a quick exercise. I want you to write down 3 things that makes your service unique. Think about your lived experience, your professional expertise, and your ability to connect with your clients, or at least their problem, or you have a creative solution that you're providing that's not in the marketplace. These are all value adds, and they should be reflected in your pricing. Now let's talk about the hidden costs of consulting. It's not just your time. It's the software, it's your health insurance, it's even your mental energy that it takes to deliver your best work. I know for me, when I do a facilitation with a group, it doesn't matter what size of the group, but I need an extra day or 2 off after I do a facilitation because it takes so much out of me. But don't worry, we're going to dive into packaging your services a little bit later in the show and how do you calculate and factor in some of that downtime into your pricing. But first, next up, I really want to talk about shifting your mindset. Pricing your services is not just about your time. It's about the years of experience, the tools that you've developed, the unique perspective that you're bringing to the table. But understand you are in the business of selling your time, which is not infinite. You can't go out and make more time. So you have to be mindful of its precious value, not just to you, but to your clients, right? Now let's talk about what might be getting in the way. One of the biggest barriers to confident pricing is fear. Fear of losing clients, fear of being told no, fear of not being worth the rate you're asking for. Let me squash that fear with some truth. The right clients will value your work and pay your rate. The wrong ones, well, they're not your clients. I want you to adopt this mantra for me. My rate is my rate. My rates are not up for negotiation. My expertise is valuable. My time is priceless. Okay? So once again, my rate is my rate. My rates are not up for negotiation. My expertise is valuable. And my time is priceless. Write this on a Post-it, stick it on your laptop, put it on your mirror, say it to yourself as you're getting ready, you're fixing your hair, you're putting on your makeup. Remind yourself of this every time you have a discovery call or a scope of work call. Maybe you say it to yourself before you get on the call. But I'd make it a regular practice so you can start building a different relationship with your pricing. So, if this is so important, I can't tell you how often I find that so many people are undervaluing their rates. They're not charging. And, I want to give you a few practical tips that you can think about adopting, right? So the first practical tip is practice saying your rates out loud. Maybe while you're in the car driving to a client, maybe on your way to driving to your co-working space, maybe on your way to driving to the grocery store. But stand in front of the mirror or look yourself in the eye in the rearview mirror and say, my rate is $250 an hour, or whatever your rate is. Repeat it often and frequently until it starts to feel natural. And depending on your rate's going to be obviously based on what's your level of expertise. Are you new to the market? Do you have less expertise or less experience than maybe somebody else? Also, what is the traditional rate for the field that you're in? The group that I was talking to yesterday, many of them work in the philanthropic sector. So a typical rate with somebody of 10 years experience or more is about $200 to $300, right? If you're new, let's say you maybe have 3 years experience, maybe you're going to start off at like $75 to $100 an hour. And as you build up more expertise and you build up more network and you build up more value add to what you have to bring, you start to increase your rate, right? Number 2, anchor your rate with confidence. When pitching or submitting a proposal, start with the value that you're providing. So here's an example. For this project, which includes strategy sessions, a custom roadmap, and my follow-up, my rate is $10,000 for this project, right? So you're establishing what you're going to be bringing to the table. So when you name the price, it's going to be less of a shock. It might still be a shock, but once again, then you have an evaluation to make of whether or not this is the right customer, right? And I'm going to talk about where you might want to deal with, choose that customer for some other value add for yourself. But for right now, anchor your rate with confidence. So once again, I want you to talk about what is the value you're going to bring, what are the deliverables you're going to bring to the client, and then establish, say, what your rate is going to be, whatever that number is, and don't back down from that number. Another thing that you can do is really start to think about what is the base of what baseline can you take, right? But the other thing that I also offer to people whenever I'm speaking on a panel, I get often asked to speak about establishing rates or talking to consultants. But the other thing that I tell, especially women, is raise your rate. And I would encourage you to raise your rate every year, especially if you are uncomfortable or very fearful about what your rate is. I really want you to just raise your rate. The first time, my first couple of years in business, I just had on January 1st, I raised my rate by a minimum of 10% every year. That's just what I did. What that did was created some objectivity around raising my rate. It took a lot of the fear away because I'm just saying, this is what I'm going to do. And what I would do is a couple of months before the end of the year, I would send a message to all my clients, letting them know that in the next year, my rate would be going up by X amount of dollars or X amount of dollars per hour, or that there was just, if I did a lot of project work, I would just say the rate is going up by 10%, by a percentage point. But once again, if you're too afraid or you don't know how to do that math to calculate what your rate increase is going to be, start with something objective and simple and say, hey, I'm going to raise my rate every year for 10%, by 10% for the next 3 years. Now it's just set in stone. It's not something you have to think about. It's something that's on autopilot. But I think in doing that a couple of years in a row, you're going to start to understand the marketplace of what's people's reaction to your rate, but you're also building in the cost of everything goes up every year. And now you're factoring in cost of living increases. You're factoring in the rate of inflation, right? Just like everybody else is doing. I'm sure you get the emails from your subscription providers. Netflix is famous for this, about letting people know that they're increasing their rate. If Netflix is not concerned about raising their rates and letting you know that they're raising your rates, neither should you, okay? So I really want you to start building this relationship with thinking about your value and the price that you're going to set. Because once again, this is going to allow you to be able to practice some of the other investing tactics that we've talked about in other episodes, whether it's saving for retirement, saving for a big vacation, saving for buying a house, saving for your children that you might be expecting. But if you're a solopreneur, this is even more important because this may be your single source and only source of income, right? So I really want you to get a better relationship and wrap your head around some of these things. So think about some corporate consultants like McKinsey. McKinsey is one of the largest. I think there's others like Deloitte. They charge astronomical fees, and they are very unapologetic about those fees. Why? Because they believe their services bring value. You don't have to be McKinsey to have the same level of confidence. Your work matters. It is valuable and important, and it deserves proper compensation, right? Especially for you to get to the goals that you're looking to attain. For those of you who want to dive deeper into building more of your confidence, I encourage you to check out You're Worth It by Amanda Steinberg or Build From Now by Damon Brown. Those are a couple of really good books that I have not personally read them, but I've heard that they're really great for tackling these issues. But once again, I love, my philosophy is the fake it till you make it. Even if you don't believe that your rate is worth $200 an hour, try it on for size. Go in your next client meeting with that rate and see what happens. You never know. They just might not blink at it. If they do, you can always negotiate down. But I really want you to get into this practice of really starting to just experiment with thinking about raising the value or at reassessing the value that you bring to the table for the work that you're providing for your potential clients. So here's your homework for today. I want you to review your rates. If you've got multiple rates for different kinds of clients or different kinds of work, Review them. Do they reflect your expertise, your expenses, and the value that you bring to the table? If not, it's time to make an adjustment. I was talking to one founder and she said she hasn't raised her rates in 5 years. Everything has gone up in 5 years. Everything. The price of eggs have gone up in 5 years. If the price of eggs have gone up, you probably need to raise your rates as well, okay? Don't be shy. Reach out to me on social media and tell me what your new rate is. I want to be able to celebrate with you. So we're wrapping up this segment. You've been listening to Do Different Better. I'm your host, Elaine Rasmussen. Next up, we're going to be diving into crafting a pricing strategy that works for you. We'll talk about packages, sliding scales, and when and how to offer discounts. Don't go anywhere, my brilliant biz bosses. We're just getting started. See you back after the break. Welcome back, my brilliant biz bosses. If you're just joining us, we are diving into the art and science of pricing your worth as a solopreneur consultant. In this segment, we broke down, in the first segment, we broke down mindset shifts that are needed to confidently own your rates. Now we're going to get into some practical and tactical things of how to craft your pricing strategy that's sustainable, profitable, and aligned with the value that you bring. So grab your notepads because I'm about to drop some gems that will help you bring a pricing system that's not just about survival, but it's about thriving. But before we dive into the strategies, let's get clear on what a pricing strategy actually is. It's the formula or system you can use to determine what you charge for your services. And here's the thing, it's not just about setting the number. It's about creating a structure that ensures that you get paid for all the work that you're doing, not just your client-facing hours or output or deliverables. So as far as I like to approach this, there are 3 components to a solid pricing strategy. 1, the base rate. 2, your overhead costs. And 3, your profit margin. So first, let's talk about the base rate. This is your non-negotiable hourly or project rate. So here's a formula. What's your desired income for the year, plus whatever your business expenses might be, plus taxes, because as a solopreneur, you're going to have to pay taxes, maybe at a different rate than you do as an individual, plus any profit that you're looking to make on top of that. So you add all of those up, and then you're going to divide by the total billable hours for the year, right? You can do it by the week. I like to do it by the year. And that is what your base rate is. That's your floor. That's nothing else that you're not going to go above. Looks like we're getting a visit from Mr. Skittles today. If you're listening to this, go watch this on YouTube and you'll get to see Mr. Skittles. Number 2 is overhead costs. Think about your subscriptions that you need, web hosting, travel expenses, even coffee for those late night work sessions or meetings that you have at the coffee shop. These all should be baked into your rate, even if it's by the project. Maybe you have your base rate, but you know that this particular project is going to require some interviews. I had one project where I had to adopt a software, recording software that took notes because I was doing a lot of stakeholder interviews for this particular client. So that was an expense that I charged to that particular project. And then 3rd is your profit margin. Your rate shouldn't just cover your expenses. It should also generate profit. Add at least 10 to 20% of your costs to your bottom line. So I've talked about the pricing, right? The 3 components of a pricing strategy. For the first 50 folks who DM me on Instagram or LinkedIn, I will make sure that I send you my Do Different Better pricing strategy worksheet, okay, for free. Now, here's the truth. If you don't factor in overhead and profit, you are not running a business. You are running yourself into the ground, and that is not what life is about. I don't know about you, but I am trying to enter my soft girl era, and I want you to as well, okay? But here's some concrete examples of what this looks like, just to illustrate this. Let's say your annual income goal is $100,000. Your expenses are $20,000. and you estimate 1,000 billable hours per year, then your base rate will be at least $120 an hour plus profit. If you're charging $50 an hour today, you are leaving money on the table and you're likely burning out in the process, which means in another year or two, you're going to be frustrated, you're going to be tired, and you're going to be sick of being a solopreneur, and you're going to run back to getting a job, which is probably why you left in the first place, was you didn't want to be on the you didn't want to be on the hamster wheel of corporate America, right? So here's another example, personal example of what I mean. When I launched my advising firm, Social Impact Now, I knew I only wanted to work 45 weeks out of the year. I wanted a week off for my birthday, holidays, and a week in the summertime. This meant that I had less billable hours to sell than somebody who was working a 50-week year, right, out of the 52. So in my pricing, I had to also account for wanting to take that time off, right? So this is how it works. So it's not just about, once again, the time that you're spending with your client, but it's also the time that you are wanting to take vacation, right? You want to be able to enjoy your vacation. So you've got to factor that into the pricing that you do, whether it's hourly pricing or project pricing. And that all goes back to your billable hours that you have available to sell, right? So that calculation that I just talked about. So now that you got your base rate, let's talk about packages for your services. Why packages? Because they help you move away from trading time for money and position you as a solutions provider rather than just a doer or an executor, or worse yet, an employee, right? As a consultant, you want to distinguish yourself from their employee. Otherwise, they would just hire somebody in their company to do the work that you're doing. So here's how you can build your service packages. One, you want to identify what are your core offerings. So think about your most in-demand services, and think about sometimes your in-demand services are not actually the services you want to deliver. So thinking about those two things, right? Is it strategic planning that you're offering? Is it workshop facilitation? Is it a specific type of expertise or a framework that you've built? Is it one-on-one coaching? However, don't just focus on what will bring in money. I find that to be the swirling toilet bowl that many consultants go, especially newer consultants, like, I just need to bring in money. I just need to bring in money. I made this mistake. The first 2 years that I was a consultant, I just did any project and I hated most of them. Didn't learn anything and didn't build anything that I could actually replicate and syndicate to build economies of scale in my business, right? So focus on what you want to be doing. Once you figure out what that is and make a list of what that is, then go and ensure that there's a sizable market for those services, then market those services, and then sell those services. You will be a much happier and wealthier consultant if you do that. The next thing as it relates to core offerings or packages is create 2 to 3 package tiers that offer increasing levels of value, right? So I always tell this with our service-based businesses, create a package. Clients are lazy. They want you to make it easy for them. And it's a lot easier for them to be able to pick a package than for you to try to create something very specific and tailored to them. Now, some customers, clients want that. But what I would say as a consultant, as somebody who's done this multiple times, I've been an entrepreneur, a solopreneur a few times, have a baseline package and you can customize those packages, right? As opposed to, once again, the one-on-one that you keep creating every single time, because it is really hard to build a business that way, unless that's what you want to do. Your partner is independently wealthy and it doesn't matter to you. But if you are actually trying to make this your livelihood, then you want to create some predictability. And so you can build some economies of scale of how you do what you do. The next thing is how to do your package pricing. So I recommend, like I said, 3 tiers optimally. Tier 1 is your entry-level offering for products who need a small scope of work. It could even be, your gateway to other services. Maybe this is the thing that people get that then they get a taste of it and they're like, oh, we want to do more of this. And then you can take them up to the next level. They can be in succession. I definitely recommend your tiers go into succession, but your tiers can also be in the amount of work that you're providing. So there's two different tracks that you can take when you think about your package pricing. So tier 1 is your entry level. Tier 2 is your mid-level package for more comprehensive services. And tier 3 is your premium, right? Offering high-touch, longer-term engagements. I think it's also really important to determine whether or not you want long-term engagements. The first couple of years that I was a consultant, I had a client, I was with them for a year and a half. I had a couple of clients. I had one client that I was with a year and a half. I had another client I was with a year. And what I realized after working with those clients was I did not like long-term engagements. And I remember walking to my office and telling my team, we are no longer taking contracts longer than 3 months. Now, a client can rehire us for a different project at their company for 3 months, but I did not want longer than 3-month engagements. For me, what started happening, what I started realizing what happens with long-term clients is they start to treat you like an employee. They start calling you at night. They start calling you on the weekends. They start asking you to move out of the scope of work. And I no longer wanted to have those conversations. So the way to stop having those conversations is I no longer have clients that were longer than 3 months. I would consider doing a 6-month project if the project was fun, exciting, and additive to the work that we already did, meaning that I was going to learn something or my team members were going to learn something that we can then employ into our current practice, right? So there had to be some value add if we were going to take on a longer client. My thing that I would tell my colleagues is like, I want to be the tender of consulting. I don't want to be here for a long time. I want to be here for a good time, right? So that was my approach. So you've got to be really clear about what's going to be your approach and what's going to be your strategy with working with your clients. But here's another example a concrete example when we talk about the pricing strategy. Let's say you're a diversity and inclusion consultant. You might have a tier 1 that's a half-day workshop for $5,000, a 2-month training program that's $15,000, and a 6-month partnership which includes workshop strategy and follow-up for $50,000, right? And those are the packages you offer. You can tweak them a little bit as far as like what people want, or maybe it's a half day is 4 hours, but you negotiate with the client to make it 5 hours. You have a little bit of wiggle room, but these are your baseline packages that you're going to offer that you present to clients that are replicable and what you can create economies of scale around. And what I mean by economies of scale is that you get to build systems that allow you to go faster, which means what used to take you 4 hours to do now takes you 2 hours to do, but you haven't changed that $5,000 price, right? That's what I'm talking about when I say economies of scale. So by offering tiers, you get to meet the client's needs where they are financially, you are able. So by offering tiers, you meet clients where they are financially while still protecting your time and your energy. Now, here's another tip. Always anchor your pricing with your highest tier first. Psychologically, this makes your mid-tier feel more accessible, and you're more likely to land those contracts. Another tip is to make the mid-tier the work you actually want to do. I usually price my highest tier. That's really work I don't want to do, and I'm pricing it so ridiculous that the client doesn't want it either because they don't want to pay that ridiculous price. But if a client does want that, I have enough wiggle room to make it worth my while, right? Because I am charging so much that I can get through it. I'm like, this is a great check and I'm going to get through it. Or I can add on additional staff, whether it be other contractors, to execute the parts that I don't want to do. And I'll be able in a position to be able to afford that extra talent at the rate that they're charging so that I don't have to do the work. This psychological hack will drive more clients to the mid-tier work by having this, I like to say a Walmart, Target, Nordstrom version, right? That's sort of the language that I use when I think about when I'm putting my pricing packages together. What's the Walmart version? It's the cut and dry. It's pick up off the shelf, drive and go, right? What's the Target version of like, hey, it's a little bit more sassy. It's a little bit more value add. And then there's my Nordstrom version, right? That's the top tier. I'm really going out of my way. I'm giving a high level of service and a high level of care. Now, I know that some of you may be wondering, what about clients who can't afford my rates? Well, first of all, it's okay to say no. But if you're really passionate about working with under-resourced clients, there are ways to build that into your pricing strategy without devaluing yourself. First is by offering a sliding scale. But here's 3 things that I want you to consider doing. 1 is set a minimum threshold. Decide the lowest rate that you're willing to accept and stick to it. And that is how you do that is by, you can define your criteria. Sliding scales should only apply to specific clients like nonprofits or startups or community organizations, for example. Create a criteria intake or evaluation form to help you objectively decide who will qualify for the sliding scale. You can also determine at the beginning of the year how many clients you will serve on a pro bono or sliding scale basis. Once you hit that number, though, the count starts again at the beginning of the next year. The next thing is to communicate value. Be transparent about the full value of your services, even if you're offering a discount. Here's a pro move that I recommend. If you're offering a sliding scale or pro bono pricing, include it on your invoice. Show the full rate, then clearly mark the discount and give the reason and the rationale in the description of the discount. My nonprofit gets an invoice every month for Microsoft Office Cloud services. The services are free to nonprofits, but getting an invoice every month is a great reminder that I'm getting something of value, even though we are not actually paying for it. Doing this ensures your value is always front and center. But it also leaves a paper trail of institutional knowledge with that organization of who they work with and the cost and the value of the work that you did, right? So if somebody wants to hire you in the future, maybe that person who you worked with before no longer works for the organization, they're going to have that information that, oh, this was the value. And so they might want the same pricing, but they have full expectation that they may not get the same pricing because that work you did before, maybe it was 12 months ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whatever the case may be, right? So now let's talk about when to offer discounts. You can offer discounts for first-time or repeat customers. You offer a small discount for their first project to build trust or rapport, or you say, hey, I'm going to charge you full price, but when you come back, I'm going to give you a discount, right? Or at the end, you can say, hey, there's a 10% discount for the next time you want to use my services. Number 2 is for referrals. Incentivize clients to refer others by offering a discount on their next project, right? And then 3 is volume discounts. If a client commits to multiple projects up front or a timeline, consider a bundled rate, right? If they're buying several packages that you're offering, you can offer like, hey, I'm going to give you 15% off if you buy 2 or more of these packages. And if you want, you can offer all 3 of these, but be clear and be sure that you let them know that they can only exercise 1 discount at a time, right? So here's an example. I worked with a nonprofit recently that couldn't afford my full rate, so I created a sliding scale agreement. They paid me 80% of my rate, but I got to showcase my work in their community, which led to 2 full rate clients. Win-win, right? Okay. So here's your homework. Take a look at your client services and rates. Are they packaged in a way that maximizes your value? If not, start by building your tiered offerings today. And remember, discounts are fine, but only if they align with your goals and what you're trying to accomplish. You're listening to Do Different Better. I'm your host, Elaine Rasmussen. I want you to stick around for our final segment when we're going to be diving into negotiating your rates like a pro and setting boundaries with clients to protect your time and your energy. You're not going to want to miss it. Welcome back, my unstoppable solopreneurs. This is the final segment of today's episode on pricing and thriving as a consultant. In segment 1, we tackled your mindset and the value that you bring to the table. In the previous segment, we built those rock solid pricing strategies. Now it's time to step into your power and learn how to negotiate like a pro while setting boundaries that keep your energy and business thriving. So grab your heavy weights. We're about to do some reps with some common client objections and win every time. Gracefully, of course. Okay, let's get into it. Let's face it, negotiation is where a lot of us freeze up. But remember, negotiation isn't about conflict. It can get there, but most negotiations really don't even get to that point. You're actually negotiating all the time. If you have kids, you are negotiating constantly. If you're on a job, you are constantly negotiating with your colleagues, you're negotiating with your boss. So you're negotiating all the time. So maybe, hopefully, this will maybe allay some of your fears about negotiating. We're constantly negotiating. We're negotiating when we drive down the street. We're negotiating with other people on the road. So negotiation is a part of life and it is natural. But in this particular instance, it's about finding mutual value. And guess what? The client expects you to negotiate. So let's turn this into an opportunity. So here are some key steps for negotiating your rates. Number one, anchor high. Always start with your highest rate or package. This sets the benchmark for the conversation. Now, I personally this isn't a tactic that I necessarily follow because I just set my rate and I've done all the calculations for my rate. But I do have my rate a little bit higher. They give me a little bit of wiggle room if I do want to give somebody a pricing break on my rate. But aiming high, and that gives you just some space to be able to come back down if you need to. But it sets the benchmark for the conversation with the client. For example, if your top tier package is $15,000, don't lead with, I can offer this for $10,000. Start high and adjust if you need to. Number two, highlight the value, not just the cost. Focus on the outcomes and the benefits of your work. How much money are they going to save? How much increase in productivity are they going to have? How much faster are they going to be able to move? How much more efficient are they going to be? How will you be able to help them to get to their strategic goals faster than if they don't use you, right? So instead of saying, I charge $250 an hour, for $250, you can say, for $250 an hour, I provide a tailored strategy that will increase your employee retention by 20%, right? Always tie your price to the client's goals, right? Number three, stay silent after you name the price. When you state your rate, resist the urge to justify or keep talking. Silence is powerful. Just let the client respond. And here's another one that I have found, a tactic that I have found. I once was on a call with a prospective client. I had sent them the proposal. They had reviewed the proposal. And the purpose of this call was to walk through the proposal, see if they had any questions. And I noticed that in this half an hour call, they had not once mentioned the price at all, which also is a clear sign that they may have issue with the price. So I brought it up. I said, thanks for all this conversation. It's been really great. I've noticed that you haven't talked about the price or the budget that I proposed. Can you please give me any thoughts that you have about the budget, right? Once again, I didn't say I'm going to cut my rate, but it invited a conversation for me to listen. Once again, that's part of your silence part, inviting the client to say, because clearly they weren't going to say anything. We were going to get off the call and we weren't going to talk about the money, which is the most important part as far as I'm concerned, right? Of like, what are you going to pay me for my time? And so I brought it up. I'm like, tell me what your thoughts are, any reflections, any concerns about the budget, right? And once again, I didn't have to respond to them in that moment. Their comments were like, well, yes, the price was a little high. That also invited another question. Well, tell me what is the budget you had for this? Or what is a reasonable price to you? Once again, I'm not telling them that I'm willing to go down my price, but I am inviting a conversation to find out from them what is reasonable to them, because then that will tell me whether or not we're in the same ballpark, or if they're living in one zip code and I'm living in another zip code, right? As far as like what the value is for my services. Okay, so now let's get into some common objections. The first one is your rates are too high, right? Here's a typical response that I use. I understand. Let's revisit your goals and see if we can adjust the scope of work to fit your budget. Once again, I want you to notice you're not lowering your price, you're lowering the deliverables. Here's another objection. Can we pay you less for this project? Here's a response you can provide. I can offer a smaller package within your budget, but for the full scope, my rate remains as quoted, right? Negotiation isn't necessarily about giving in. It's about finding a win-win solution. I want you to be firm but collaborative, and your rates reflect your expertise and value. So not a starting point to haggle, right? This isn't a carpet that you're buying at the flea market, right? This is your rate and your value. Okay, so now we're going to talk about setting boundaries with clients. So now that you've locked in your rate, let's talk about the boundaries you're going to set. Because the fastest way to burn out is by letting clients push past the limits you didn't set. So let's fix that. Here are some tips for setting clear boundaries. 1, define your scope of work. Make it crystal clear in your contract what's included or what's not. And maybe you're not getting to the contract first, you're getting to a proposal, or you're responding to an RFP. And then do what is in the scope. Do not go above and beyond. If you need to put a sign on your wall or you work in your office, do not go out of scope, or no scope creep, right? To make sure, because every time you do that, you are now devaluing yourself. If you're hired to deliver a workshop, make sure that contract specifies prep time, delivery, and follow-up hours. Anything extra, that's an additional cost. 2, set communication rules, right? Establish how and when you want clients to contact you. I do a launch call with my clients, a project launch call. And in that project launch call, I ask everybody what is their best mode of communication, what are the best times of day or times of the week to communicate with them. And then we also set up our project meeting for the duration of the project. So whether that's weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, whatever it is, we set up all the dates, like what are the dates, optimal dates, and we set them up on that call. So here's another example. Let clients know how you respond to emails, whether it's in 24 hours or you don't take calls after 6 p.m., then stick to it, right? Number 3, be upfront about revisions and extras. Create a policy regarding additional requests. For example, your contract should specify how many revisions are included, anything beyond that you're going to bill them for their time. So one thing that I do in my contracts is I will say, particularly if it's a project, I'll do maybe a report and I'll say as a product of the report, they are allowed 1 set of revisions, right? Any additional revisions, or if they delay the timeline of those revisions because we agree to the timeline up front, there is an extra charge, and usually I outline what that fee may be, whether it's an hourly rate. One time I had a client we were doing intake with a group of stakeholders, and they wanted to extend the deadline by 2 weeks, which means my report was going to be an extra 2 weeks, which meant that was going to impact my timeline of my other projects. So I said, I am happy to do that, but that will be an additional $3,000 charge. That's up to you, because now, and I explained to them what this is, and I don't think you need an explanation, but I had a really good relationship with this client. So I went and explained to them, this will now impact my other client work, and I will have to hire somebody to take on that work because we have to finish up this deliverable for you. So if that's something you want to do, I am happy to do that. I like to be the yes person, but yes, and this is what it's going to cost you, right? So now let's get into maintaining professional relationships as we wrap up the show here. Boundaries don't mean being rigid. They mean being clear, and clear boundaries actually improve on client relationships. When everyone knows the rules, it builds trust and respect. So here's how you can end contracts gracefully. Celebrate the success. Before the project ends, schedule a wrap-up meeting to review the wins and lessons learned. This is your chance to reinforce your value, position yourself for future work. Number 2, keep the door open. Leave clients with a sense of collaboration, even if you don't want to work with them again. You can say thank you. You can thank them for the opportunity and let them know that you're available for future work or referrals. 3, protect your energy. If a client relationship becomes toxic, don't be afraid to walk away. Politely but firmly in the contract. A simple way is, it seems you have different expectations for the project, and I think it's best for us to part ways, is all you need to do. So here's my final call to action for you. Take a moment at your current client relationships and contracts. Are there areas where you need to set better boundaries? Are you negotiating your rates with confidence? Excuse me. If not, then it's time to make some changes, right? So that wraps up today's episode on Do Different Better. I'm your host, Elaine Rasmussen. Remember, you're not just a consultant, you're a powerhouse of expertise and value. Don't let anyone, a client or otherwise, convince you of anything different. If you loved today's episode, leave a review, subscribe, and share with others, fellow solo entrepreneurs who need to hear this. You can watch this and previous episodes on YouTube at Do Better with Elaine. Let me know what you think of the show. We love comments, so tell us how the show has helped you. If there's a money or finance question that you have, or if there's somebody you want me to interview, hit me up on LinkedIn or Instagram at Do Better with Elaine, and I will see you next week when I show you how to do different better. See you next time.